Tino, anyone say you look like Jamie Bell, the actor?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LFC Transfer Room with myself, Louis Felt, joined by Kev and Drew for another fantastic post-match reaction stream immediately following that horrific start to the year as Brentford run out 3-1 winners over the mighty Reds, or not so mighty anymore, it seems. I may be laggy, I'm cheap. Not 100% sure what's going on. Apologies if that's the case, but hopefully you can just about understand what I'm saying, can see me. But I'll let the boys do most of the talking for this one. I would ask you all how you're doing, but I don't think I need to ask on this occasion. I think we will just jump straight into it. Tino, probably hard to know where to start with that one, apart from the fact that we are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I think that's an understatement, to be honest with you. It's disappointing. It is obviously disappointing. And for the first 10 minutes of the game, we weren't too bad. We looked to be controlling possession, was working it from side to side, trying to create some chances. It just after that, it just went downhill. It really went downhill. And it's not like it's the first time we've seen it this season. It's been a consistent thing from the very first game of the season right till now. We've just, specifically in the last, since the World Cup, Villa game, atrocious, absolutely awful. Leicester game, horrific, and somehow because of two own goals by the same guy, we managed to win that when, let's be realistic, we didn't deserve to. So it's not like it's a new thing, which is a frustrating thing. It's been a consistent thing from the start of the season, and for some bizarre reason, we seem to be sticking to the same setup, the same formation. We tried it earlier on before the World Cup to change it a bit, and it didn't really work. And then we've just gone back to the same thing. High line, playing the same players who aren't good enough to be starting for Liverpool Football Club, who have got older, and it's just frustrating as we unfortunately lose Louis. It is an annoying thing. It is a very much frustrating thing. It's one of those where we can see it coming. We can see it coming, and nothing's changing. You see Paul Joyce, I think recently before the game, put out a piece saying essentially that's us done in the transfer market. That's us done. We haven't got any more money to spend. We're not really going to be looking at anybody in midfield until the summer, which is even more heartbreaking when you look at how we played. The only person really from the first half who I thought looked okay was Thiago. That was okay, not great. Second half was much better, but we didn't really achieve anything of note. Yes, we started off really well. We got the goal, then it was ruled out, and then we got another one and made it 2-1. But it was just, we've struggled all season and nothing seems to be changing, which is the really, really gutting thing. That's where I stand, at least. It's just nothing changes. It's the same shit, a different day.
So I don't know if anyone can even hear me at this point. Wi-Fi is going crazy up at the moment. So apologies if I'm in and out of the stream a little bit, but thank you to everybody who is joining and watching, much appreciated. Kev, I'll come straight over to you as well. Just your initial thoughts on that. I'm sure they're not positive, but a lot of people in the live are angry as well.
It's hard not to be. We're seeing, as Tino quite rightly said, we're seeing things that we've seen all season. I don't know what we were expecting to get from Brentford, but we know when you turn up there, it was going to be, you're going to have to be relentless. You're going to have to be quick on the counter-attack because they've got pacey players. They rely on set pieces, throw-ins near the box, corners. We didn't do any of that ourselves, and what we helped in those areas. Costas costs us for the second with a stupid trying to do a Thiago pass when the same pull pass was to Alisson. He then causes the problem. He then gets back into position. And what does he do? He gives away a corner. We end up nearly conceding from that corner, get away with it. And then we have a midfielder who then starts playing, dummies with balls that there's nowhere near to be dealing dummies with. And within 45 seconds, we find ourselves 2-0 down through our own mistakes. And this has been happening all too much this season. We have a forward line that saw Salah playing out on the wide like he did at the start of the season. And there's no idea as to what's going on with that at all. We've got the only one who's running in between and trying to cause chaos in Núñez, but there's nothing backing him up at all. I thought Ox did okay. He was the only one in the first half that really was tried to do something. Costas was just a joke at left back and should have been shot from the first minute. If he had a brain cell, he'd be dangerous. We have a midfield that has been obviously it's blind loyalty from Klopp that tends to think that there's nothing wrong there at all, when we can quite literally see where the issues lie. We have a young player, who is going to get absolutely ridiculed over the social media this weekend before the FA Cup game, and he doesn't deserve it because he's not playing in the right position. And I've said this at the start of the season. I got nearly lambasted for saying it. He that's not his position. We are playing a round peg in a square hole, and it does not work. He can get away with it with a few games, but with the let's be honest. I'm not making excuses. Brentford deserved their victory tonight, and they should have won by a 4 or 5. And if Tony was playing, that would have been 6 or 7 tonight, because we were absolutely diabolical from starting from all of those 10 outfield players, apart from 1 or 2. The second half, I expected a reaction, because what does Brentford do if you're 3-3, if you're 2-0 up? You sit back for a bit and you allow the other team to have a bit of the ball. That's what happened. We didn't do anything out of the ordinary, and for 5 minutes we looked okay. Other than that, what did we do in the second half? It was like we have no ideas whatsoever, and we wait for Thiago to get the ball to try and create something. We need to rely on other players. If we're not starting Carvalho, what's the point in them having been on the bench? Our bench was absolutely weak. So there was nothing even there. So it was all down to the starting 11. It's frustrating. It's angry. And at some point, Klopp has to take some responsibility for what's happening at this present moment in time. I think he has too much power at the club. With what's going on with the takeover, I do think that power is shifting quite much into Klopp's favour, and he has the final say, as well as having the dictation as to who's coming in and who's not. That didn't help. That doesn't help, because he's blinded by loyalty, and he's blinded by loyalty with players that are actually past it now for me.
Jed, thank you very much for the donation, much appreciated as always, and thank you to everybody who is joining us as well. Plenty of Liverpool, but plenty of other clubs looking to see us in misery, and congratulations, you've got what you wanted. Whilst you are here, do leave a like, please do subscribe to the channel as well for all of Liverpool football content. Drew, coming to you last but not least, just for sort of initial reactions. It was, as the boys have said already, a tough watch, and I suppose more scarily than that, that was pretty much a full strength for us, bar a couple of attacking plays. There wasn't much go off. There wasn't much to look forward to go off the bench, and even when we made wholesale changes, it wasn't good enough to overcome a team like Brentford. So what do we do from here?
Baffling for me. That's not an easy answer, but for me the most disturbing thing was that we only looked in it for like 20 minutes entirety for the game, the first 10 minutes, and then after the changes at halftime, and then it just, to me, it looked like we were just hitting the box, or hitting the ball into the box, and hoping Núñez would get on the end of it. As Kev said, he was isolated. There wasn't much support, and it just, when did we become a long ball team? Really, I felt like majority of the times we tried to do it. Yeah, Ox scored the 1 goal off a cross, but it seemed like we worked the ball in at that point, and Trent had a good cross in from the side, not this long ball over the top. It's seeing that again and again and again, Brentford kind of knew what we were doing. And then, what was it? They only had less than 25% possession in the game, or maybe a little more. It was atrocious. And first 3 corners they had in the game, they put the ball in the back of the net each time. Got called back on 2 of them, but 2 crosses for their goals pretty much. In the first half, it's just, I don't, like, where do you go from here kind of thing. For me, I just want to get rid of the players who don't believe. Didn't look like many players were fighting. I think that kind of mentality seeps into the team as well. If you see players just frustrated and dropping their heads, it's kind of hard to pick up and rally everyone. So we've talked about this on the channel for a long time. We need upgrades, especially in midfield. Don't think it helps that Jota and Diaz have been out for so long. They added much needed spark. We're kind of relying on old legs that we know have been failing for a long time now. As much as Ox, I thought he did well in the Man City game, did well today. It's past the point where we're looking at him as an option for a player in this team. Keita, same thing. Injuries, players who are getting old. It's about time this squad has had a rebuild, especially in the midfield. We've seen it in other positions, but it's just sad to see so many players with their heads down and not believing in the team. And for me, I think you got to get rid of those players who don't have a long-term future or don't believe in the project. Still believe in Klopp. I think he can get it together. I don't think, you look at Man City dropping points this year. It's, as much as I hate it, it's a transition, especially with Nunez coming in, changing up the way we play. That doesn't mean he's free from blame. I think, it's pretty obvious he's made some poor decisions personnel-wise, going back, or at least questionable. But it's not an easy fix. I just hope we get top 4 by the end of the season, and that's all I'm really hoping for.
Of course, a lot of people, unsurprisingly, talking about transfers in the live chat, and also Klopp and FSG, who's responsible for not buying that at least a midfield in January that we clearly quite desperately need. We will get on to that in a moment, but focusing sort of on the game, I think what was pointed out quite a lot, Tino, was our high line, which I was a proponent for last year coming into this as well. People had their doubts about it at the time, and I defended it to the hilt. I loved it. But now, more often than not, what happened last year was, a team would get called as offside, but they'd score a goal, and people would think, oh, they nearly scored, but they're offside, so it doesn't count. But now we're seeing more and more often it's tilting towards it's actually a bit more detrimental to our results, and it's actually causing more problems than it's solving, because our midfield doesn't have the legs to carry out the hard pressing they really would do. Is that something that we need to drop, and is that something that's so easy to do mid-season when it's something we've been working on for the last 2 or 3 years?
The high line is an interesting one, because as you mentioned, we have been so successful over the past 4, 5, 6 years with that high line, and then all of a sudden this season it's just not worked. And ultimately it stems down to the intensity in the midfield. If we don't have the legs, we don't have the pace, we don't have the pressure going forward from the midfield and upwards, the high line doesn't work. And that's where Jurgen Klopp has to come out and take some flack for that, because it's clearly not working. It hasn't been working all season, and he's just too stubborn to notice, or too stubborn to change anything now. He's set in his ways, and you think, dude, like, just you don't have to sit defensively. You don't have to park the bus. Just drop it a few yards. The pressure isn't there in the midfield. Change something up tactically just to see if it works. And he's done very little. Another issue is just communication, because this game specifically, in the last 2 games we've played since the World Cup finished, we looked poor. We weren't communicating to each other. The centre backs just looked like completely separate players. They looked like they're playing completely separate games. And Brentford today deserved the win. If I was Jurgen Klopp, I'd drop the back line easily. Drop the back line 2 or 3 yards, maybe 4 or 5, whatever you want to do, and just test it. Just see how it works out, because it can't be worse than what we're currently experiencing. Because it's clearly not working, and yet he's too stubborn to notice that. And within that midfield, because of the lack of intensity, because it's an aging squad, it just doesn't help things. And it's incredibly frustrating to see. We've got no structure, it looks like no game plan, no discipline. And you sat there screaming at the TV or screaming at the match, and it's gutting to see, and it's heartbreaking to see because of how successful we've been so far. And for me, Jurgen Klopp isn't infallible. He isn't this perfect, all-seeing, all-dancing manager. He does make mistakes, and this is a mistake that he's made that he hasn't acknowledged yet. And we'll get in the press conference, I guarantee it'll be the same excuses: fixture schedule, World Cup in the middle of a Premier League season, and all the other garbage excuses that get bandied around every time, instead of sitting there and going, it's the formation that isn't working, the players aren't good enough, or just changing something, because you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect nothing to change, and expect to get something better and make an improvement, and all of a sudden we magically become this amazing high intensity pressure Liverpool team again, when it's not working. So you've got to change something.
Kev, another aspect of this game, I think, was
We're losing you, Lou.
I think he's gone.
Kev, what most worried you about this game?
Everything worried me after the 10th minute. I can't believe we were going into this and how blindsided we were. This isn't Brentford 2 seasons ago that we hadn't seen. We know exactly what they're about. They've been about it since their first game in the Premier League against Arsenal. We saw what they do. We saw what they're about, and we haven't done anything whatsoever to fix that or contemplate that. We've gone into this game very naive and very, very much thinking that we are the underdog going into this game, when it's and a bit of trepidation. I was kind of excited, as you probably gauged from our chat last night, and I've changed my mind since then, obviously, and I'm not going to put on here what I posted, but I was kind of excited going into this game. Then you see that Tony isn't playing. He scored the majority of their goals this season. So I was then thinking, well, where are they going to score the goals? As long as we stop them and prevent them from crossing balls and giving them corners and giving them opportunities in around our box and giving them throw-ins because they like a long throw-in, you were guaranteed that we would have, it would have been pretty much the second half of which they would struggle to get out. We would probably create 1 or 2 chances and we'll go 1-0 up. But what happens is an absolute diabolical. I'd expect at a schoolboy level, if not kids level, of what we did. It's frightening how bad our actual midfield is at the minute. It's scary. Oh, we got Louis back. Hey.
Sorry, guys.
Right,
just
right.
I'll try my best. But what I was going to say was, before I go again, probably, Kev, another part of that was the substitutions at halftime, I think, and I think there was a bit of a difference between the first and the second half performances. Part of that was Virgil van Dijk not being on the pitch as well. Somebody mentioned earlier, which I put on the screen, can't remember.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there's some truth in that? I think a lot of people have been kind of to it for a few weeks now, before the World Cup as well, and he hasn't necessarily been at his best. Maybe he does need some time out of the team, Virgil van Dijk.
I agree. Why not? No one's infallible to this, to what's going on. I don't care if you're Virgil, Ali, or whoever. If you're having a stinker of a game, which he did in the first half, and that turn of pace by Mbue, who goes in, and you see he's actually struggling with pace, trying to keep up. He's been like that all season. If we're brutally honest, we haven't seen Virgil play well this season. He's looked okay. He's looked all right in games. He's got by, and we are not seeing we're not seeing Van Dijk at his best at the minute, and he probably does need a change. Let's not get carried away about what happened in the second half, because that second half performance couldn't be any worse, and it was only slightly better only because Brentford came off the gas a bit and were then stuck in their own half for a bit, and were then went playing on the counter attack. But let's be honest, we didn't actually create nothing apart from the first 10 minutes. We caused a bit of mayhem for a couple of minutes, and then we thought, well, do you know what I mean? And we'll try and get another one near the end of the game. But then what happens is the counter attacking happens, and they come in and score a third. Pretty much the same team. I think if you would have kept the team as it was, it would have still been the same scoreline. We didn't see anything different. There was nothing on that bench that could have created it or created more than what we did, and it was evident from that. We needed to make changes, and it looked as though it worked for a bit, but it worked for about 5 minutes. But that's because Brentford weren't Brentford in the first half. If Brentford were Brentford in the first half, I still see them scoring goals and playing us. We hate at the minute. And the agent of our team hates anyone when they play physical against us and they press us. When they start doing that, especially in the middle of the park, we lose anything that we had going into that. And it showed today how poor and how weak and how flimsy our midfield is. You know, the spaces in between the lines. There's no communication when Elliot starts coming over to the left hand side with Costas. There's no kind of communication going on at all. So then what happens then is that instead of hitting us down the left right hand side, that everyone thinks where the problem is, Frankel actually knew where the actual problem was, which was on our left, and that's exactly what he highlighted, and that's where they got in, and that's where majority of our weakness was on that left hand side. And it is surprising that Costas is part of that problem. He's not good enough. He's decent in certain games, but if he had a brain cell, he would be very dangerous. It's worrying at the minute, and you could have took anyone off. But going back to the question, I think Van Dijk, there's no question he could come out of that side, no problem. I'd be happy with Matty and a Kanate. Happy days with that. I'd be, at the end of the day, Kanate's our future, and Matty, I think, should have started the game myself personally. Do you know what I mean? We needed him, because if you look at what Brentford did, especially in the first half, they went to 6 at the back, 3 in midfield, and played on their counter attack, and they had 6 in the line, and we needed someone to bring people out. And what does Matty do? Matty does that. He starts getting in and around, and that's what's required. But Van Dijk, happy for him to be out for the minute. He hasn't played his best for me.
Thank you to everyone for watching. Please do like the video. Please do subscribe. King of substitutions, Drew. The one that never was, the forgotten man, it feels like, Fabio Carvalho. I'm not suggesting, I don't think anybody who talks about this is that he would have necessarily completely changed the game on its head. But, I don't think Curtis Jones has maybe shown enough recently to deserve coming on ahead of Carvalho. I mean, what do you think's going on with one?
Yeah, at that point, I felt like it was too late anyway, throwing on Curtis Jones for the final 10 minutes. I honestly, I don't know. Carvalho, I've been 50-50 with him. I honestly wouldn't put too much pressure on him at all. What is he, 19 years old? So expecting him to come in and completely change our side is a bit, too much pressure. I feel like Harvey Elliott lands in that category as well, putting all these expectations on someone at that young age. I just think that shows where the squad is at, where we're looking for inspiration from teenagers, which shouldn't be the case. They should be coming into a team that's already lifted and able to help them like settle in and thrive, hopefully. But the fact that we're even looking to them to be, to carry this team is just kind of speaks to the levels of where everyone else is. And for Kev, on the Matip scenario, for me too, that also says like the midfield. I've said it before, but the fact that we're relying on Matip to carry the ball through the midfield and create in the attack, just where's our midfielder doing that? Said it early in the stream too, the fact that we're just clipping in long balls over the top to Nunez with no support and just hoping he wins a knockdown. And it, Brentford, who have 6 in the back line, as Kev said, don't pounce on the ball that drops, is pretty poor strategy. We know that Nunez is super fast. We've seen him, like that first play with Salah linking up with him. I was expecting more intricacy around the box before clipping in the crosses from the side, but I don't think Carvalho changes that. I don't think, looking to him to change that is fair on him. Again, but if he's a positive head and believes he can do it, I'd put him in. For me, it's any player whose head's dropped, any player who doesn't believe shouldn't be on the pitch. It should be one of those ones. If you don't believe you're going to win, if you don't believe you have an active agency in the game, I don't understand why you're playing. You can't be a passenger, and I think that's why we look to players like Matip, who take the game on their shoulders and say like, hey, I'm going to do something. It's sad that we're looking at a center back to do that. I don't think it's realistic to put those expectations on a teenager, Harvey Elliott or Carvalho, but we have Diaz out, who was another player we were talking about earlier in the year, just taking on so much responsibility, so much excitement. Nunez is a new player. He's really raw talent. I haven't been too impressed, I've been impressed with his skill, not his end product, but I think that just carries on. Every time you miss and you get on him, that doesn't do worlds of good for his confidence. It just seems like nobody believes, which I think is, at the end of the day, the most worrying thing. Either Klopp's got to fix that, or the players got to do something amongst themselves to pick their heads up. But if we don't believe, we're not going to win. And that, for me, is what it comes down to. It doesn't matter who's on the pitch. You need to believe.
A lot of people, as I said earlier, talking about who is to blame for this. Obviously, the players play a massive part in it. I still hold the belief that those out on that pitch at their best should be, getting the 3 points 9 times out. But I think we certainly underestimate Brentford to an extent. They've beaten City this year, United did, just off the back of a 2-0 win against West Ham. They are a very good, well put together side at the moment, and going through certainly a purple patch in the season. But ultimately to be much better than that. In terms of who's to blame, as I said, players share a massive part of that. But then the other debate is between FSG and Klopp. Tino, some people think it's massively with Klopp, especially with some of the things he's been saying in his press conferences and based on previous behaviours at other clubs and loyalty to players when he should be a bit more ruthless maybe. Others much more of the belief that FSG are to blame. They're not backing him. He's maybe sticking up for them or what. Where do you sit in that?
I think Jurgen certainly has to take some of the blame. I do at times think people don't really appreciate what I think you need to take what he says in press conferences to a certain extent with a pinch of salt. Partly because he's not going to come out and absolutely rip the living daylights out of his full midfield. Whether he thinks they're good enough or not, he's going to back them in public. He's not someone like Jose Mourinho, who in the past has done that and come out and individually roasted each individual player that he doesn't like. Jurgen Klopp isn't that type of manager. So I think at times people need to understand and appreciate that. But the blame in terms of who we bring in, solely for me, lies with FSG and the money that they are providing Jurgen Klopp and Michael, well, whatever is the new guy, Julian Ward. For me, as much as from a business standpoint, the way we run the club being running it within itself, so it's self-sustainable. I love it. I like it from a business standpoint. But then there comes a point in time where you've got to invest and you've got to look at the problems on the team and go, oh God, we could be undoing all of the amazing work that we've done so far within a year. So it's kind of 50-50 for me. It's kind of 50-50. I think I'd lean more towards Jurgen Klopp as a whole being to blame for the whole situation in terms of that midfield, in terms of what's going wrong, because ultimately he picks the players. Whether he's confident in them or not, he's going to say that in public. But he picks the players, he decides formations and tactics. Him and his coaching staff decide all of that, and it's not working. So ultimately that's down to him, and our poor form and the way we've been playing is ultimately on his shoulders. And I think as a fan base, we need to be more critical of him specifically and not just go, FSG run the club like a self-sustaining business model. They're all to blame. They're the guys they're the bad ones. They need to leave, etc. We need more investment, which all of that is true. But I think a lot of the way we play and how we play is all down to Jurgen Klopp and his management coaching team. And I think we need to, as a fan base, understand that and appreciate that and criticize him more.
Kev, one or viewpoint that I see on a lot of these post-match reactions when we have bad results, it has been a bad season. Not going to hide from that fact at all. But something that gets thrown at is, Klopp needs to start having questions asked of him. We need to start asking questions of Klopp. But what does that mean to you? Because I don't see that he's not allowed to be criticised. I don't see that he isn't receiving criticism. I wonder if for a lot of people that's code for his job needs to be put on the line. I don't know if maybe when people aren't saying that with their chest and they're looking for I'm calling out a lot of people in the live chat is what I'm doing basically. But now, what to you if you heard someone say that, or if you indeed have that kind of feeling as well?
I think the issue we've got is that we always, when something goes wrong, whether in football or in life, we always want to part that blame onto someone. Now, at the minute, an easiest thing to do is to blame FSG and go, well, you haven't done this and X, Y, and Z. But that has to come back onto the manager. His actual stubbornness is part of the issue we've got. Now, I for one don't want him to go. I think he's the best thing that's ever happened to Liverpool. Fits us like a glove. But his stubbornness and his tenaciousness of not seeing things that are quite literally in front of him makes me wonder makes me criticize him a little bit more than what I tend to. It doesn't help when it comes after a Brentford game in which we knew what they're about. This is not Brentford 3 years ago who've just come up and we're brightly seeing what's going to happen. We know what they're about, especially at home, and they play in a style of play that frustrates us and we always struggle against, and it works well. Klopp has to take blame for that. His loyalty to these players is part of the problem. But then the other issue comes back on FSG for not providing them with a contract already so that we could be in a position now to that let's look at our midfield. How many of these are leaving at the end of the season? There's about 3 or 4 maybe, and maybe more. How many of them are out of contract at the end of the season? The likes of a Naby Keita, he's 50 million. You've got Hendo as well. Surely to God, if he's that loyal, this is where the problem lies with me, because you've got the loyalty. I get that, and I understand that you'll always have that, and you'll be blinded by loyalty. And we as a club have always had this. Back to Shankly, I've mentioned it before. We've had it with Shankly. It took a 1970 FA Cup game against Wolves before anything actually changes, and we see a young Ray Clemens come and goal. And then the changes happen. We are blinded by loyalty, always have been through our history, and you'll see it all the way through. What Klopp, if he's that loyal, then this is the problem you got with FSG. If he's that loyal to these players, why aren't they on contracts? And so that we can secure the asset that we've got, so that we can actually be in a position to ask for an actual price for some of these players. We're in a position now where if we need to sell someone now, we can't, because we've got no one to sell, and we won't get any kind of money for. And anyone that we do want to get money for are the youngsters, the likes of a Curtis Jones, who I think needs to go on loan rather than actually be sold. That's the problem you've got, and that's why I think it's more of a 50. It's like a 57. It's basically what Klopp's doing on the pitch should be represented upstairs and go, right, well, they're your loyal players. I'll make sure that they are secured and we have them under contract for you. There you go. No, but instead, there's no communication on that side. And it feels as though we're now in a position now where we have a midfield in which we're struggling to get rid of anyone. I think Klopp needs to start realizing, and it doesn't help with his comments before the game either, and saying that, this is not a monopoly and all like this. And again, I get it. He's not going to come out and say, yeah, we're desperately looking for a midfielder. But I'm sure to God, if a fat, horrible person like me can see what's going on at the club in midfield, surely to God, someone who's in a coaching capacity can see it as well. So, I'm not alone in that. I've seen it all season. Being a season ticket holder, it's worrying when you're seeing teams like Leicester run right through the middle of us and scoring goals, and we, a Brighton as well playing well against us. We've had problems all season, and that problem has come through a high line and us not changing formation. And that comes down to stubbornness, and it comes down to loyalty. And he has too much power at the club, and no one's willing to turn around and say, no, let's change it, let's adapt it. Let's see how Benfica adapted to Nunes. Let's see how we can adapt our game style towards what is successful to them.
Drew, is a good comment here from Anissa, who at the start of this stream, I think was emotional as we all were, but I think this is quite a good position if you're looking for a bit of a 50. We have those who will need initiative to make us better, and we have a manager who will never push them to be more ambitious. It's not a good combination. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that take?
I think it's a little simplified, but there's elements of it that sound right. It seems like FSG have gotten to a certain point and aren't comfortable with splashing the cash, as Jurgen Klopp quoted in his interview. I also think Klopp's very defensive of them in interviews as well. But I think it comes back to what Kev was saying about loyalty around players. I think the criticism, again, I still think Klopp's a brilliant manager. I don't think anyone can argue against that with what he's achieved at the club. I don't think you can realistically look at what FSG have done for the club and say it's been all bad. I think you have to take those positives in. I think it just comes down to, I'd ask questions to Klopp, like at what point does an injury record take someone out of the team? Or at what point do you get to where a person's injury record isn't worth having him on a long-term contract or keeping him at the club? Like those kind of things. It's stuff we talked about in the summer where, are we really relying on Ox and Milner? Henderson picks up his injuries. Fabinho's picked up one or two. Milner at his age, those are big midfielders. Then you got some youngsters. It's where's the balance there? Thiago, this season has been amazing. I could only imagine what we'd be like if his injury record was like the past two seasons. Thankfully it's not, but when it comes to the point where you're relying on players that are always injured or past their prime, legs are getting old, those are the kind of questions that I'd be asking Klopp. And then you go back to we were challenging for the quadruple last season with these same players, but it's more miles on the odometer. I've made the reference saying that it's like we're relying on a bunch of old cars that are past their mileage and hoping that they don't break down. It's like we know they break down constantly, and there's been no reinvestment in that thing. I think that's where it comes down to. It's loyalty as much as it is. It comes to the fact where these are professional players. You can cut them. You can say, hey, you know, it's unfortunate things didn't work out the way we planned, but we wish you the best in your future. You know, always grateful for what you did do for the club, kind of thing. But there's far too many players who have been kept on and haven't been at the standards. I think that's where it's come to. We brought this whole project forward to be challenging for Champions League, to be challenging for the league consistently, but we haven't been ruthless from that point forward. We haven't made the jump from getting there to maintaining that we keep refreshing and keep being the best to push forward in the future. That has been a lot slower than I'd like to see. So I think we, like FSG and Klopp, have been happy with where they've brought the club. I think they need to take that next evolution, though, and be a little more ruthless. But that's where I stand.
Well, the press conference is already going ahead, and Klopp has taken to the referees on this one. Tino, thank you very much for sending the quotes over. Much appreciated. Klopp said the third goal should not be a goal. Easy as that. Trying to talk to the officials about it is like trying to talk to my microwave. They stretch the rules. That's why it's difficult. VAR hides behind the phrase not clear and obvious. The referees need to explain that. Brentford could dictate the game because of how it got whistled. Now, Tino, is this a man desperately searching for excuses, or, as you said earlier, is this, you know, someone sticking up for his players in maybe the only way he knows how?
A mixture of both. Let's be realistic. The third goal, the foul on Ibrahim Konate, is not a foul. He gets his legs caught, trips over, and then he slots it in. It's not a foul. Simple as that. Tactically, we looked poor. Even with the two we talked about earlier, even with the two chances from the goal at the near post, the third corner they got, we overcompensated. We should have shoved everybody at the near post. Ball floats over to the back post. He chests it down and volleys it into the back of the net. That's on Jurgen Klopp. That's not on the referees. That's on the players. That's on Jurgen. He's overcompensating for the fact that on a base level, this Liverpool side this season has been goddamn awful, and he's, as any manager would, he's blaming everybody else other than the actual players, and saying and holding the hands up and saying we didn't appreciate how good Brentford have been against some of the big sides in the league since they got promoted. Because it's not just this season Brentford have come out of the blue. It's the last couple of years since they've been in the Premier League. They have constantly shown their ability to outperform some of the big players because they underestimate them. And that's what we did today. It's not refereeing decisions. I thought the refereeing wasn't too bad. I thought it was fair. He let some decisions go on both sides. I do agree to a certain extent with regards to the clear and obvious, but that's just a Premier League issue. That's a VAR as a whole issue within this country, not just this game. So I think Jurgen's doing what he's bound to do. He's blaming everybody else, and then behind closed doors, privately, he's going to absolutely rip the living daylights out of those Liverpool players. Because yes, for the first 10 minutes of the second half, we were better. We played well, created a couple of good chances. For the rest of the second half, it wasn't good enough. I think he's clutching at straws, if I'm being honest. I think he's clutching at straws in relation to the refereeing, because I didn't think it was that bad.
Kev, has Klopp lost it a little bit? I feel like the tide is turning. You know, if our if our lovely watchers and listeners are a microcosm of the Liverpool fan base as a whole, it looks like this result of out of all the bad results this year has been a big one, a tough pill to swallow, and a few more people a bit more up for having the conversation about a post Klopp Liverpool. Do you think?
I do, Lou, sadly, and I think it doesn't help with this pre-match comments either, on in the fact that it's not a monopoly, and we'll if we can get things done, that only just riles up the fan base, and then we go to Brentford and put in a performance like that, and you can imagine yourself, mate, on social media. It's not the best place to go if you're a Liverpool fan at the minute. If you're looking to get yourself away with mental health or anything like that, I would keep well away, because it's just an absolute, it's a minefield, and it's a shame really, because there'll be young players who are going to be part of that. Nunes will get the usual heavy start of it. Elliott as well is going to be bombarded up until the Wolves game, as I said earlier. It's a shame really, because had he not said what he said on prior to the game, yeah, it's difficult. I agree with Tino. He's I've never seen Klopp kick off on any of the players for a bad performance. He'll blame the wind coming into the stadium just so that he can get away from blaming a player, and he'll take it indoors. And I prefer it that way. Some people are going to get to the point now where they want him out. I don't. I think it's very naive if you start thinking that Klopp isn't the answer and can't turn it around. Yeah, he's loyal. We can be loyal, but it's actions speak louder than words. Now things need to happen. Now things need to change. And until that changes, I'm look. It's not the best performance. It's not. It's up there as one of our worst games under Klopp for me. I'm quite happy to stick with him, at least to the end of the season, and see what happens where we are in the league. Depending on that, and depending on new owners that come in, will a discussion come in? Because it will happen. Because at some point when new owners come in, they'll want their own man in there if they don't think that Klopp is the man for them. There'll be many people that want to take that job. But for me, it's far too early to start thinking that you want Klopp out. I think you need to wobble your head a little bit, but it doesn't help. He's not helping the situation himself with how loyal he is. He needs to take action now and needs to do something in the 29 days we've got left in the window.
Drew, just briefly looking ahead before we sort of wrap things up on this one, and Campachi says, I think Real Madrid will be happy watching this shambolic performance. Look, I'll always back in a knockout tie. It's, anything can happen. We've looked okay in most of the Champions League games, I think. The rest of January, whilst there's going to be rumours of all sorts of whatever player we could be in for, Nunes has come back up again, the one who went to Wolves for 36 million and we want to now buy for 44 6 months later. We're going to get a lot of that this month, but what can we realistically achieve this month in terms of results?
I wouldn't want to put faith in us bringing in a new midfielder. I think that's what we need to do. I hope we make good cup runs and get top 4. I think that's realistic expectations. I'm really curious to see how Gakpo fits into the team. He's a very exciting signing. I don't think we should forget about him. Diaz and Jota, looking forward to their return. So as far as Real Madrid's concerned, I think we have enough to beat them. Just turn around, look at the game against Manchester City at the Cup. That was extremely frustrating. I felt we should have pushed it over the line, but we do have players that can cause damage. We just need to get consistency. We need to get together and believe pretty much. Like, we all have seen the quality of our team. Just needs to get firing, and I think Klopp needs to be the orchestrator there to get everyone on the same page. I think it'd be huge if we could bring in another midfielder. Hopefully that's the case in January, because I think that would solve a lot of problems or give us something to rally around for moving forward. But getting players like Diaz and Jota healthy, getting everyone on the same page, bringing Gakpo into the team and seeing what he can do. There's, I'm putting more towards optimism, but I think realistically, if we can get top 4 and push in either the Champions League or the FA Cup to give us something to cheer about, I think that'll be a good end to the season from where we are. So let's hope we can do that.
Yeah, well, that is all we can do, isn't it? Remain as optimistic and realistic as possible. Football is an escape from our everyday lives, and what doesn't always go our way, and certainly hasn't been for most of this season. We just got to pick ourselves up, and as a famous Liverpool legend once said, before slipping on his arse a week later, we go again. That concludes. I thought that was a good little way to the exit. Thank you to everybody who has been watching. If you haven't done so already, please do like the video, please subscribe, and thank you everybody in the live chat as well. It's great to see all of your opinions, all of the conversations, all the debates going on in and around the stream as well. Thank you, Tino, Kevin, Drew, for joining me, and we will see you in the next one. Have a lovely rest of your evening if you can.